So today it gives me great pleasure to introduce my husband, Christopher Brookes, to you. He has lived on the island for more than 40 years and retired 15 years ago as the director of Northwest Fine Woodworking, which was a woodworking co-op in Seattle. Subsequently, before that, he has lived in Africa and Kenya, Nigeria, and Canada, and has traveled extensively. In the last 5 years, we have been taking tours for the US Lighthouse Society, and today's tour and presentation on South Africa is a combination of the tour we took with them and the tour that we took a couple of years earlier on our own. So welcome, Chris, and we're looking forward to hearing all about South Africa today.
Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. This is I take and create and lead tours for the US Lighthouse Society. And for those of you who don't know much about the society, it was formed almost 40 years ago in the San Francisco area by a group of people who were very concerned at the loss of lighthouses. They were being not looked after very well. They were being demolished. It's a terrific part of America, well, the world's history. And as such, they formed a group to raise funds, to raise money and make repairs when the government was not making repairs. But part of that was to build interest and take people around the world to see the different lighthouses. And that's exactly where I came in several years ago. Several years ago, they moved from San Francisco, in that they had always wanted to have a lighthouse as their headquarters. And 8 years ago, they had the opportunity to acquire No Point Lighthouse in Hansville, which is where they are presently headquartered. And shortly thereafter, I was asked if I would help them with some of their tours, and subsequently have now done 12 tours to different corners of the world. I want to, before we get into the too much of the tour, I want to give you a sense of the size and scale and location of South Africa. When I look at the globe, I always see the big sort of South America going down one way and Africa going down the other way. But you should need to note that Cape Town is not as far south as the tip of South America. It goes just to about 35 degrees south. 35 degrees south, if you put that into the northern hemisphere, is the Mediterranean. So the climate of this southern part of South Africa is very much akin to that of the Mediterranean. It has its differences, and obviously it's not that far from the Antarctic, so you've got some pretty tough winds and storms coming that way, and it's on the receiving end of the monsoons coming across the Indian Ocean. For this tour, we wanted to start our tour in Cape Town and visit lighthouses along the coast, but it's not just lighthouses. When we take people on tour, we want to see the sights, and in this particular instance, we wanted to see game, wild game. There is one small game park in the Port Elizabeth area, Addo, which we will be visiting. But if you want to go to South Africa and see game, you need to be up in the north here. This area, if I go from the Zimbabwe border all the way down to Swaziland, this area here is Kruger. And this is the single, in my view, the single best area for game viewing in Africa. But the distances are huge. From Nelspruit, well, we went to Hoedspruit, which is just above that. The distance from Cape Town to there is 1,000 miles. So this is not a small territory. And the climate differences are huge. I talked previously about having a Mediterranean type climate down here. Once you get up into Durban and this coastal area here, it's almost tropical. But then when you get up into here, Kruger sits at about an altitude of about 2,000 feet. It's much drier, desert-like, and it's absolutely gorgeous country. It doesn't, because the height and the distance from the sea gets rid of a lot of the humidity, but it has this beautiful warm temperature. But let's get started and first of all show from a lighthouse perspective. I wanted to we start in Cape Town, and there's a cape just south of Cape Town. Very much wanted to get down into here and see the group there. Up to Columbine, which is the most interesting light. Across what is really, I'll call it the vineyard area of South Africa to Franschhoek, and then down, all the way down to the very southern Cape here. This is Cape Aguilas, which is the southernmost cape of South Africa. From there, we traveled along all the way to East London. Then there's an incredibly dangerous stretch of coast, a 300-mile stretch of coast. No cities, no rivers, no ports. From East London to Durban, there's almost nothing but cliffs and very dangerous seas. For shipping, it's a horrendous area in that if you're a few miles offshore here, it's a few hundred feet deep. Go 10 miles offshore, it's 5,000 feet deep. So when you get these storms coming in from the east, the seas build up and you can get just very, very difficult conditions in this part of the world. So let's get started. We start our tour in Cape Town. Cape Town is just, it's a wonderful city, great place to wander around, really quite safe. The most interesting area is right down by the harbor. It's full of lovely shops and restaurants and fun. And obviously sitting right behind there is Tabletop Mountain. The key here, if you look right at that top corner, you'll see a bit of a bump. That is the lift house. And at some point, we're going to take the cable car from behind the town here all the way up to the top. You can walk for miles on the top. We walked some distance, but I did not get all the way across. But the tour is going to start in Cape Town. We are going to see a little bit of the city. Then we're going to be going off to some of the parks and gardens. But in Cape, we always start the tours with a welcome dinner, in that on this group was a group of 24 people. Not all of them were Americans. We had a Finnish man and a Dutchman and several other people on the tour. And we start our dinner at Africa House. Africa House is this incredible, crazy restaurant in Cape Town. All the menu, whether it's the bread or the salads or in this case, a curry and kebabs, every recipe comes from some part of Africa. But not only that, when you get in there, they get it. We're sitting in the Egyptian room, and the ladies got into this face painting. There's Janet and another lady on the tour. But not before going in there, I had learned that one man on the tour happened to have a birthday on this very first day. And the first day sometimes is a little almost stilted and people don't know each other. But we decided we were going to make a big birthday celebration out of this. So I hope I'm going to play you a video recording of that happy bit where I got the wait staff involved and we did a whole happy birthday for people. Just let get. But they didn't stop there. The wait staff loved these, just putting on parties. So the whole party kept going for a little while.
We can't hear Chris at all. We can't hear it, Chris.
Well, I can't do anything about it, Janet. But I'm sorry, I just heard you didn't, that people couldn't hear the music very well, but I've got it at full volume and I can't make an adjustment at this point. From there, after we left the restaurant, and the following morning, it's an easy morning. We're going to do a walk around the harbor. We found wild game, quite different wild game. The rhinos all finely painted, but we hadn't gone very far around these shops before the ladies found a very exciting sign, and they're getting all excited about what they find there. And it's a very interesting restaurant that changed itself to a husband daycare center, which people thought was highly amusing. They volunteered to look after your husband so they could go off and have time to themselves, relax, and go shopping, and all you had to do was pay for his drinks. But as you walk around Cape Town, this whole thing about signs got really funny. A few further down, I find this one where your husband called and said, "Buy anything you want." Next one. This is an interesting one. A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until you put her in hot water. But then it got a little better. I kind of relate to this one. Stress spelled backwards is desserts. Coincidence? I think not. But we had to get on, and beyond the shops, right in the downtown, just almost half a mile from downtown, are these glorious parks and glorious walks, and we spent ages walking through them and up to Government House. From there, we picked up our bus again and went up to Kirstenbosch Gardens. This is the Kirstenbosch Gardens are probably about 10 miles outside the city center. It's a little, but they are absolutely gorgeous. Large forests to explore, and open savannas, open fields, and every plant you could imagine. I could spend hours just wandering around Kirstenbosch. In addition to the gardens, they also have a treetop walk. This is Janet. I don't think she feels terribly stable on top of the treetop walk, but I love this, where you get up at the top so you can actually see the flowers and the fruits in so many of the trees. But we couldn't spend all of our time in the gardens. We wanted to go up to the top of Tabletop Mountain, and this is the ski lift they've put in to get you to the top. At the top, you can see for absolutely miles. This is looking southwest. The peninsula, the Cape Peninsula is going down here. Offshore, you can just see the outline of Robben Island. Robben Island is going to be our next stop in the, for those of you who follow Africa history, Nelson Mandela was imprisoned by the British on Robben Island for 18 years. Very important prison, which we will be going to. But the view to the south is spectacular. The view, you look right down on Cape Town. Where we're staying is in this area. The industrial side of the harbor, bigger ships go over this side, but you can get boats all the way in. But this is looking down, and then looking to the north, this beautiful light over the mountains just to the north of Cape Town on that morning. But we can't linger, and we have to get out, and the following morning, early morning, we're off on our boat journey to Robben Island. The mountain you can see back there, it takes about 45 minutes to get out there. Our first lighthouse stop, but it's not just a lighthouse. We're here obviously to see the lighthouse, but we're here to go to the prison to see where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned. The two of our group at the top on the lands in Cape Town in the back. Our prison guard was a man of some size. Now the guides in the prison are amazing, in that to be a guide in this prison, you have to have been in prison with Nelson Mandela, which is, they can tell you stories day long. What I loved probably the most was how Nelson Mandela managed to change the atmosphere and routine of the prison. He arrived and it was terribly harsh, and there were a lot of fights, a lot of problems. He convinced the prison authorities to let people have lessons, to let people have a garden. But in the process, what the prison guards did not know is that the garden became their post office. So Nelson Mandela, unfortunately, had spent many, many years in solitary confinement, so he couldn't communicate very well with the other prisoners. But what they did was they kept a post box buried in the vegetable garden. So every prisoner was a very avid gardener and had their little section, but that's how Nelson got messages back and forth to other prisoners. In addition, he was very good at getting the other prisoners, if the prisoner had a skill, if they'd been an electrician or been a plumber, he got them to set up classrooms so that when an inmate ever got out of there, they came in with no skills, but they left with a trade, which was very valuable. In addition to communicating between themselves, they really wanted to have more communication with the outside, and of course the authorities weren't very keen on that, and made sure tried to make sure it didn't happen. But again, as this man explained, they had their way of doing it. As things relaxed, they had their garden. People were allowed to play sport. One sport the Africans liked was the English game of cricket, except it was played not with a solid, very heavy leather cricket ball, it was played with a tennis ball. And if they wanted messages to go outside the prison or get a message inside the prison without the guards knowing it, they would set up a game of cricket, and then all of a sudden one ball would be substituted where they'd slit it slightly with a razor and pushed messages inside the ball. That ball would be bowled slowly, and the batter would bat it right over the wall of the prison. There would always be a bunch of people hanging around on the outside of the prison who would throw the ball back, except it wasn't the same ball. They kept the ball with the message hidden inside and threw a new ball back in, sometimes also with a message. So it was just a lot of fun going and hearing, oh, this is our group of 12, from all over, all ages, all over, as we were, on this instance, running around Robben Island. From there, we stopped at Greenpoint. Greenpoint is on the mainland, very close to Cape Town, but it's also the headquarters of the South African Lighthouse Service. Slankop, technically a very interesting lighthouse in that it was all prefabricated with giant sheets in England, and they created the frame and bolted all these sheets together. I've never seen one done quite like that before. But not everything can be reached by bus or car. There is off the Cape, there is a very interesting light called Roman Rock, and the only way we could figure out how to get there was to rent these high-speed boats. Now, if you look carefully, people are not sitting on seats. We're riding saddles. You have a saddle and a very heavy bar in front of you, because these boats could travel up to 30 knots and spin on a dime. We wanted them as a ferry to get us out to the lighthouse, but they really wanted to show us on the way back how these boats can be maneuvered, and a lot of spinning and turning, and just it was a kind of a wild ride. But before I chartered this boat, I had no idea of the power that they had on their engines, and I'm just very glad that we were riding saddle as opposed to benches, because I'm sure I'd have probably been thrown out. But we leave there, we're off out, it's a few miles offshore, and we finally reach Roman Rock. Roman Rock was actually a very difficult lighthouse to build, because there is limited tidal movement, and they needed to get strong foundations on the rock before building this. And it actually took them 4 years to build. Lots of cormorants there, and on our way back, as we pass different rocks, you find lots of cormorants, then other rocks covered in seals. But this is where we're always having fun on the tours, and we started to mess with people's minds a bit, in that we're in hot climates, but we're heading for this beach just over to the left, and on that beach are penguins. And you don't think of going to Africa and finding penguins, but on the Cape, there are colonies of penguins. These youngsters are now almost as big as the adults, and they're still demanding that they be fed. But it was just fun to take. We surprised people. They didn't know they were going to find penguins, but we took them along on that boat ride. From there, we went out to Cape Point, which is the very southern tip, and it's not just us. Every bus tour going out of Cape Town, going to Cape, takes you to Cape Point. And this lighthouse, this was built here 120 years prior, but they didn't think about it very well. And that this lighthouse is at an altitude of 650 feet. For giant chunks of the year, it's covered in mist and fog. All the winter months, the cloud hangs low. Nobody could see this light. So within 20 years of it being built, they realized they'd made a terrible mistake. And what they really need was a light way down on the rocks, about 150 feet above the waterline. So even when the cloud was sitting on the point, it could be visible. The interesting question, I looked at the path and it really looked quite steep to go down, and I wanted to make sure it was safe for our group to go down. Hanging around the top here was our tour guide and 6 other tour guides. I asked them collectively, is this path going down here safe or okay for us to go down? Not one of them had ever been down to the lower lighthouse, so they couldn't tell me. It was a little steep to start off with, but then you got down and it came down, and there's this beautiful little light right on the rocks with a beautiful Fresnel lens in the top. Now, I'll be talking a little bit about lenses and things in the future, but one of the joys of Africa and poorer nations is that they haven't fully modernized. If you're in the United States or you're in British Isles, you don't find these beautiful Fresnel lenses anymore. They've gone to modern LED lights, which are about a foot tall and 2 foot tall and a foot wide, and completely replace these beautiful lenses. But we had to leave Cape Town, and the first thing I wanted to do was go north up to quite an interesting light at Columbine. And as you go north on the west side of South Africa, it gets drier and drier and drier, and within 200 miles, you're within desert. But there's this lovely town, lovely village at Columbine. I thought this was the most interesting display. These people had their garden out front, but as part of the display, they'd put an old dinghy and anchors, and just very interesting. Columbine in South Africa, whilst there is a lighthouse authority, there is a lot of regional differences in control. And in Columbine, we climbed, and here, I want to point out whilst we're here, the Fresnel brothers in Paris in the 1850s were the first people to realize that you could use a prism type lens and bend light and the refraction of light. So if they set this light, this lens, and this lens, and this lens, and this lens, and this lens, each at a slightly different angle, the light source could be bent and focused at a point 1,000 yards away with incredible intensity. So each of these lenses is focusing the light 100 yards, 1,000 yards, or even half a mile away from the lighthouse with such intensity and such power that it's not like a lamp burning here. That light, if focused out here, can be seen as far away as 20 miles. It is so powerful. Oh, our crew, within the group, there's various mascots and hauling around. I don't quite remember. They must have been carting this bear or dog around, and they're just having fun. they looked after this building so perfectly. Here's the machine room. You could have eaten your breakfast off the floor there. It was so meticulous, so well done. But then what I liked was this little sign, in that within the lighthouse world, there are really only 3 sets of brothers who got this whole thing going. The Fresnel Fresnel brothers in Paris were the people who started to understand lenses, light refraction, and how you could assemble a light frame that focused the power source. In Scotland, you had the Stevenson brothers, who figured out the engineering of building lighthouses on little rocks in the middle of the ocean, and how they could withstand massive storms that completely covered the lighthouse. And then about 20 or 30 years later, the Chance brothers came along, and they further advanced the technology. But for me, the thing is, the Chance brothers came from Birmingham, which is where I'm from. So I always claim that I have at least some link, but we'll talk a little more as we go along, as these 3 families. But the Chance brothers in Birmingham were the last. Stevenson and the Fresnel brothers were the most important to get it started. Once we quickly left that area and started to cross the central wine country. Absolutely gorgeous. And you could see in the housing and the hotels the influence of the Dutch. This is very much a beautiful Dutch style. And we could sit out and have our meals, and this is just fun. Oops, I'm going to go back one. But we try and get going in the morning, have a nice lunch, and then get going again in the afternoon. But we stayed the night in this area. Then the next morning, we have to head back for the coast, and we're on the lighthouse hunt again. But it's not just lighthouses. We were looking for fun stuff. And my contacts in Cape Town had told us about Bientang. Bientang is where somebody had taken there was a giant cave in the cliff here, and they created a restaurant that sat in the cave, and the surf just pounded up along the front here. It sounds great, but I have to say it was a little cold. We all needed blankets and things for our lunch. We're into too quickly 2 more lighthouses. Danger Point. Climbing lighthouses is not always the easiest thing. You've got lots of stairs, and climbing up through different hatches and holes. This is Ron, one of the guys on the. And now this is a giant #1 lens, the biggest lens that were ever built. Some of them are 8 and 10 feet high. Again, you can see these prisms, and this is what is focusing the light. But as you start moving along the coast and you stop near a restaurant, all of a sudden you find all these markets, and this is where I lose my group. They're all off making deals with different vendors, which is fun. But then we come to Aguilas. Aguilas is where the Indian Ocean meets the Atlantic Ocean. It's a pretty wild place, but old cottages, beautiful hotel, and hundreds of miles of beach. Nobody there. If you're in Europe or North America, you go to a beach and there's people walking everywhere. We could walk for miles and see nobody. The original discoverers of this part were the Portuguese, and this is a replica with a local maritime museum with a replica of the first Portuguese boats that came to this part of the world. Lovely old cottages. Some of them are obviously now shops or bars, but just a lovely area. A lovely painting. This man had put a very interesting painting on his side wall. And obviously on the cliff there are modern houses, but there's a fishing fleet there. I'm not sure. These waters are a little rough for me. I don't think I want to be in a boat of that size on these waters. Interesting bow spit. From there, we went to Storms River. Storms River, very aptly named. This is very much how that, I talked about that wild coast, and this is what it's like. It's just cliffs and cliffs, rocks. But at Storms River, it's a great place to stop for a lunch. There's a nice restaurant here, but then you can also have a good walk. And the walk is down the cliff, down to a suspension bridge that's been built over the river to the other side. You can't go too far beyond that. It gets very steep cliffs. But this was one of our stops. And at the end of the day, it was time for a swim and horsing around on the beach. And you can actually see the next lighthouse over this lady's shoulder right there. That's a telephoto shot of Seal Point, which is the lighthouse we saw. And the following day, we went there and climbed. I love the birds of South Africa. We're coming back to more birds later on, but this, the shore, they have these delightful oyster catchers. Oh, and then we stopped at Cape Recife, and Cape Recife is a lighthouse in trouble. The wind and the sands are blowing and blowing, and this building is now half buried by sand. They didn't seem to be doing too much in the way of defense or clearing it, so I'm not sure whether this lighthouse is going to be around in a few years' time. Port Elizabeth, again, another interesting light, now just a tourist spot and abandoned. This obelisk was actually built by the British ruler or governor of that area. It's a memorial to his wife who died there. But from once you're at Port Elizabeth, we actually went for one night into the Addo Elephant Park. Addo is not the main. We're going to do game park viewing later on. Addo for us was just a one-night stop, a nice place to stay. I've been there before. I've seen hundreds of elephants in Addo, but of course, this time when I take a group there, this is about the only elephant I can find. Elephants have moved off to another part of the park, but we made up for it with lions. Our guide, the second early morning, was very good. He was getting ready to drive, and he heard this very distant roar. And he took us off, and again, we freaked everybody out in that we're in open jeeps, no roof, and drive up pretty close to this lion. And but the animals are apparently quite used to humans driving around, but you keep quiet, you don't make any noise, and they're happy to let you take their pictures and move on. This is a kudu. I like the absolutely gorgeous horns. But as I said, this was just a short overnight stop on not the main part of our animal hunts. From there, we went up to Fish River and to Hood Point, other interesting lights. And just north of Durban, we went to this absolutely gorgeous hotel, the Oyster Box. Our tour was a fairly expensive tour, but I couldn't, within the guidelines given, I couldn't afford for us to stay at the Oyster Box. But we could certainly go there and enjoy it and eat. So the Oyster Box Hotel sits on the shore, and sitting right in front of it is a lighthouse. But first, we went in. This is the curry bar. Take a group of Americans overseas, and you'll find that many of them have never tried or may not even like curry, I don't know, but they're a little scared of it. They don't know, they hear these different curry names and they're not too sure. So this curry bar, they had 8 different types of curries, and the staff were fantastic. They'd suggest, why don't you take a little soup bowl and try it? And everybody had a riot here. They'd rush up and try this and rush up and try that. And you add all these other little ingredients of nuts and fruits into it. And after you finished your curries, then you got into the dessert bar. Just exquisite. And it was not just the food, but the presentation and the gorgeous orchids and interesting plants. And this is one plant I had never seen before. It's like a giant pineapple plant, but it's got this beautiful red bloom. as I said, right in front of the hotel was this giant lighthouse. At night, they did put a giant screen and shade around it so it didn't shine directly into the hotel rooms. From there, we went a little further north to Shakaland. Shakaland is a little touristy, but it's essentially Zulu. The Zulu created one of their old giant chief homes, and they put on a show for you. Inside, the chief tells the stories, and then we get into the dancing, and it's really fun. But it's not quite Disney, but it doesn't feel quite authentic, but it's a good show. At that point, we were getting ready to move from the main lighthouse tour to the safari part of it, and we like to find fun places for dinner, and this place is called the Cargo Hold, and it literally is on the harbor front in old cargo warehouses with giant aquariums. This lady is 5'8" tall, and you can just see that the size of the aquariums are 2 and 3 times her height. It's just a wonderful place, and they serve you dinner right in front of the aquarium. But from here, we have to say goodbye to two of the people on the tour who did not want to go to the game parks. They were the Europeans were quite happy to they really wanted only the lighthouses. But from there, we left. We were going to Hoedspruit, which is right on the edge of Kruger. To get there, you have to get an early morning flight out of Durban, go to Johannesburg, and in Johannesburg, make a small jet connection to Hoedspruit Airport, which is right on the edge of Kapama Game Park. This is Kapama, an exquisite, gorgeous hotel, and it also has exquisite, gorgeous pricing. And this is where I want to explain to you that you can go to Africa or go to the game parks of South Africa and have very similar experiences without spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars a night. Your alternative option is drive yourself to Kruger. I think this is my rental car up here. I'm paying about $30 a day to rent my car. I can stay in the South African Parks Commission has these rondevals, these gorgeous self-catering thatched huts, which are beautifully clean, and you're taking care of yourself. And I'm spending about $100 to $120 a night to rent this. I'm spending probably $30 on this. So for $150 a night, I can drive to Kruger, drive in Kruger. Obviously, we have to do some of our own cooking and some of our own washing. Jenna's probably going to kill me for showing this slide. But, we travel light, wash our own shirts. Outside each hut, there's a braai. The Afrikaans word for barbecue is a braai. And there would be a little stove, a little gas stove. There's air conditioning. They're air conditioning if you want them. Exquisitely clean. Some have self-catering in the huts itself. Others have a separate kitchen, which you just walk over and get your hot water and whatever you need. I will say that the trip I'm taking you on today along the garden route and then up into Kruger, it cost, probably with everything almost $8,000-10,000. Janet and I made the same trip 2 years prior, where we didn't stay at the very best, always at the very best hotels. We stayed a lot of these incredible parks, these rondevals, and we probably spent per each of us about $2,500. So the message I want to get over is there are ways of getting to Africa and doing this a lot less. The cost of getting to Africa, the way we like to do it is Emirates. If you keep your eye open, you can get a Seattle to Cape Town airfare for less than round trip, less than $1,000. What I like to do is we get up, catch the late afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock flight from Emirates to Dubai. You arrive the next day. That's about 11 hours, 12 hours of flying, a lot of flying. I get off. We get off. We don't continue. Instead of the next connection, you land at 6, 7 o'clock at night. And there's a terrible connection. I say 1, 2 in the morning to South Africa. We get off there. We go and have a nice dinner, night in the hotel, get up, and I catch the second flight, the one that leaves at 9 o'clock the next morning. So for less than $1,000 each, you can fly round trip Seattle to Cape Town. For about $100, $120 a night, you can be in the game park, staying at wonderful self-catering lodges. In South Africa is the only place in the African continent where I would say it's totally safe to drive yourself. I wouldn't drive myself in Kenya or any of these other places, but there are ways of getting to the game parks and doing this in South Africa without spending a fortune. Obviously, when you're cooking and getting your own food, you get some visitors. The lot where the Rondevels is, this whole area around the back here is electrified fences, so you can't get game coming in here. But that doesn't stop the hornbill arriving to try and steal your breakfast. So we had lots of visitors like that. Going back now to the lodge, we're at Kapama. So every day, beautiful breakfasts, interesting settings, and then we'd set off on our game drives. If you're in Kruger and you're driving yourself, you're on surfaced roads. We are just outside Kruger. Kapama is wild country, and there are no surface roads. It's jeeps and get around as best you can. Each day we would get up in the morning, have our driver, and on the bow of the jeep is your game spotter. He's watching for tracks. He's watching for what's going on. The driver concentrates on getting you safely through some of these areas. The spotter's job is to tell him to stop or start if he sees interesting game. This is not a telephoto shot. We're right there. This couple of females and a baby came out of the woodland right as we were driving along. They're right there with us. They don't take much notice of us. They're happy to wander on. They're obviously looking for food somewhere. Same with the rhino. We came right across him. There's always one of the things people talk about going on game parks is the big five. So what I've started with here is the big five, which is the elephant, the rhino, the Cape buffalo. These are nasty, bad-tempered beasts. You don't want to be. They happen to be down in a muddy hole, protecting themselves from the sun. But I don't like getting too close to Cape buffalo. Lions. I love coming across lions, and this was rather a fun one. In that very often you don't see the male there. They're generally groups of females, and this is obviously a young cub wanting to get up and get a love from his mother. But they're very playful, very fun. They're used to the jeeps and people. You're in open jeeps. They don't worry you, although sometimes you can get a little close. And one night I was a little concerned because this fellow was right in the jeep alongside, and he wasn't too happy at my presence. But no worries. We just keep on moving. My last big one, the one I always have trouble finding leopards. Leopards I find very difficult to find. But we found this fellow in long grass up amongst the trees, just keeping an eye on the game. For me, Africa is not just the animals. The birds of South Africa are absolutely incredible. The colors and the plumes of these birds. And I'm just going to show you a few of them. This is the roller. The first time I saw a roller, I just couldn't believe the color. Then you come along with the flycatchers, absolutely exquisite birds. I could spend ages and ages looking for these characters. There's then an incredible kingfisher. Difficult to catch and photograph kingfishers. They're a bit skittish and land and take off just as I'm about ready to take the shot. These are the weaver birds. I never quite figure out how they make their nest, but they kind of put a loop over a branch and then create this hanging nest and enter their nest from the underside. Very interesting characters. And then, of course, everywhere there's the vulture. In Africa, there are multiple kills every day as the animals hunt for their food, and these folks are not far behind. In the rivers and the pools, always very careful. These hippos are pretty bad-tempered characters generally, so I don't like to get too close to hippos. And if I do, I like to be on a high bank looking down on them. And then we were on the river one day, and I haven't seen much in the way of crocs, and there, right there, just moving it as we came down, moving into the water, was a crocodile. And the warthog. These are their characters. They're a little skittish, but they're quite curious and will come up to the vehicle and kind of want to know who you are. Zebras everywhere. One of the more prolific species in all of the game parks I've ever visited are the zebras. Giraffes, inquisitive. Sometimes they hide in amongst tall trees. Sometimes difficult to find, but I just love them. But I'm afraid all good journeys and all trips have to come to an end. We've traveled the garden route across southern part of South Africa, flown up to the game parks, and this is our farewell dinner at Kapama. They set the nights here. It must be, I'll say, 80 degrees, a dry heat, dry 80. A lot of meals are done with a buffet style, and so that they're not always sure what you'd like, and so they set you up. And this was our last night. We had a last night buffet in Kapama, but from there, unfortunately, after there, it's bye-bye to Africa one more time. I'm very fortunate in my life in that I've lived and worked in Africa, traveled there a lot, and been to many game parks. But if there's one message I leave you with today, and that is, if you haven't been on safari, try and figure a way out, rather like we did initially. We're trying to save our pennies, and it is possible. You don't have to spend $8,000 and $10,000 a person to get there. It can be done with a lot less. And if anybody ever wants more details, I'm more than happy to explain at another time. But from there, I'm going to hand it back to the moderators, if we will, please, and I'll try and answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions? Does anyone have?
Hi guys. There were so many different architectural styles to the lighthouses. How come?
Each one is, and then was never in England or in Africa. It's never one administration. It's a local administration. Obviously, firstly, the location of the lighthouse is going to govern a lot of what can be done. And also between 1850 and 1890, when most of these were built, there was immense changes in construction ability. Going back to the very earliest ones, if you needed a lot of granite and concrete if you're near water. If you're on land, then you can make all sorts of other changes. But technology plays a part. The salesman plays a part, and it's not one salesman peddling lighthouses. Unfortunately, the French were in there, the British were in there, the Dutch were in there, all trying to, one group may be talking to Cape Town, the next group may be talking to the lighthouses in Port Elizabeth, and they all have obviously their own axe to grind. and there is no uniformity. The issue is sometimes money. They want to do it as cheaply as possible. Safety takes a big issue, particularly. For instance, way up here, where are we? Richards Bay. Right now, there's they built a lighthouse too close to the cliff, and the cliff is falling down. So there are a lot of safety issues and foundation issues. And if it's water, the problems were immense. And the Stevensons of Scotland were the first people to understand and mathematically calculate wave force. And they developed what I'll call the scalloped waistline shape of a lighthouse, which dissipates and throws the water away. So it's not a one straight answer. It's basically a lot of different people advising in different ways.
Christopher, I have a question. Would you do us a favor and show us on the map there your itinerary?
Sure. The itinerary starts in Cape Town. From Cape Town, the Cape Peninsula, which is, can I enlarge that a bit? Try a bit. So from Cape Town, we started going down to the peninsula, and I showed you those boats, the boats where we went offshore. That's just this side. The Cape Point, which is the one lighthouse they built that was at 600 feet and ended up sitting in the cloud, and they had to build another one. From here, we went north up till Saldanha. This starts to get dry. By the time you move up into here and Namibia, you're in total desert. This is desert. So by the time we got to Saldanha, this is the dry, lovely, warm coast. Water supply is a problem over there, lack of water. From there, we drove across this central area. It's not showing me the name of the town. Well, we were close to Stellenbosch. We came across, this is the wine country here. And if you're going on a garden tour of South Africa, you probably would stay a little more inland. All the lovely gardens and wineries are in this area. We came to here, then we came back to the coast and followed it all the way down to Cape Aguilas. This is where the slide is, where you've got the Indian Ocean on this side and the Atlantic Ocean on that side. This is the dividing point. From here, we move along. Storms River is not quite close to Knysna. It's in here, so we came across the Storms River. The Addo, the only game park which in the south, which is worth going to, is Addo, which is in here. This area, Addo is quite. It's large. There's people who will say, "I've got a game park," but to me, it's like a zoo. This is large enough space to let the animals run free, but it is close enough that I can see a road, or I can see actually the sea while I'm there. From there, we drove up. There are lighthouses in Port Alfred and East London, so we went there. From East London, we flew to Durban. From Durban, we went down south towards Port Shepstone, where there were 3 lighthouses. And from Durban, we went north towards Richards Bay. Didn't get there, but there are 2 or 3 lighthouses here. Shakaland and this is Zulu country here. This is very much where the Zulu tribal people are. And Shakaland is right there on the coast, a little north of Durban. And that beautiful hotel I showed you is in Durban. Went back to Durban, flew from here. I have to come down. We flew from Durban up to Johannesburg. Then from Johannesburg, we took the small jet up to Hoedspruit, which is just north of Nelspruit, right on the edge of Kruger. And the game park people drove out in the Jeeps, met us in the Jeeps right at the airport and took us right in. But if you want to see the whole of Kruger, you can only drive, maximum speed is 20 miles an hour anywhere in Kruger. It would take you at least 2 days driving to get the whole length of Kruger. It is massive. The southern part of Kruger is drier, and as it's drier, it's a little easier to find the game because you could see them. You get up in here, it starts to get a little wetter. The foliage is much denser. I came around the corner up here one day and thinking I'm the only person there, and standing right in the middle of the road are some very big elephants. I have an interesting elephant story that goes back to another park. The first day we were there, we're driving on a very tiny, small road, and I spotted an interesting elephant. And I said, well, if we go around this corner, I can get a good photograph of him. So, but instead of him keeping going that way, he turned straight at us. And the janitor's yelling at me to do something, but I can't do anything. I can't go forward. And the road is narrow and windy with big thorn bushes either side, so I can't reverse. So I just sat there. I had kept the engine running, and the elephant walked right up to us, and then he stepped aside and walked around us. But so the journey is basically in two parts. It's I'll take this map down in size again. Down here, the Cape, along the south, flew to Durban, then up into that area, and from there home. I hope that.
Where's Robbins Island?
I'm sorry.
Where's Robbins Island?
And Robben Island is right just there. It's 11 miles to the west of Cape Town.
Well, thank you, Chris. We really enjoyed having a little bit of sunshine in our day today, and I thank you for doing that.